All right, welcome to Camp Okayest, powered by X2 Power. Of course, X2 batteries and all of the lithium needs you need to be outdoors, available at your local Batteries Plus store. I'm your host, Shaun Ritter. We've made it to 3 weeks, so spent the last week up in Door County, Wisconsin. As I argued last week on the show when Tubbs was on, I call it the smallmouth capital of the world, and I said, you can come fight me. I think that's a very fair assessment. I was actually up there fishing with the man you see on screen, Jon Reznack. He's one of the clam pros, blackfish, all this and that, fellow fish addict, bass head, fish head, smallmouth, all everything with me. So it was a great time. Thank you first for the invite, Jon. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for joining us. It was a really fun trip.
Yeah, it was truly, I think, the essence of, we talk about camp, the show being Camp Okayest, and you think of camp, it can be everything from just like your family out camping to deer camp, to, as we kind of did, we put together sort of a fish camp, so to speak. It was myself, you, your old man came along, jumped in your boat. Of course, the way the trip went about was I went up ahead of time on Friday myself with my kayak. I fished for my kayak in a location in Door County. I'm not going to get too specific of things. We are going to get very specific, by the way. So if you are into smallmouth fishing and want to learn more about catching smallmouth, specifically these big pre-spawn smallmouth in and around the Great Lakes, we're really going to dive into some of that throughout the show here, and I'll get into specific baits and other stuff like that. But just kind of painting the picture and bringing you along with us through camp, how we did it. So I went up, fished Friday from the kayak, caught two. One was decent, one was okay. It was 15 and 17. Then hooked up with my boy Jon here, as you see, and his old man in his bass boat for Saturday and Sunday, where we really tried to go after it. The mission was a 7-pound smallmouth. So my biggest so far is 6.24. What's your biggest smallmouth you've caught, Jon?
It's just over 6.5, and it wasn't even from Door County, but yeah, 6.5, just over 6.5. So,
all right. So that was the goal, was 7 pounds. We'll spoil it now. We did not catch a 7-pounder.
We tried. I mean, we really did try. We threw a lot of times. Shoulders still a little sore from it, but
yeah, we even busted out some of the big baits. I came home on Sunday and I told my wife that she had to break out the special CBD stick that we get from our friends at Kind Oasis in Milwaukee, that makes this amazing stick. It's got like menthol, so it like numbs, but also like the full spectrum CBD, which also has huge benefits. And I know if you're like afraid of the cannabis plant, it's not like your 1960s doobie stuff. Like, this is a completely different thing. It's very, very medicinal. What it's used for, it's so great for muscle pains. I say all the time, people like golf all the time and have pains from swinging a golf club. It seriously could help you. I've really got into it with fishing, and that's what I'm like, I'm going to need it in the shoulder blades, because after throwing an A-rig for a lot of the weekend, I may as well have been muskie fishing at that point. You start throwing around such big baits all the time. So there's no doubt we definitely got into some big baits.
Yeah, it's one of those where we tried to throw big baits. I know I threw my fancy swim baits that I have, the Tiny Clash DRT. Threw that for a whole whopping 10 minutes, cut it off and put an A-rig on, and we threw that for a little bit, and yeah, nothing came through on it, surprisingly.
Sometimes those pre-spawn fish really can respond to the Alabama rig. It's such a great bait to use in that time of year, because they're putting in feedback, getting ready for the spawn. But we found a lot of different stuff while we were up there. So I think ultimately we were about a week early, I think, from when like really true like spawn and like that hardcore they're starting to push up on things is going to be. I think if we were headed up there this weekend, I think things would be much differently. I think just the way the calendar played out, but also the weird weather.
Yeah, I mean, what was it? Saturday it was like partly sunny, and then 15-mile-an-hour winds or whatever. And then we had some rain move through, and it was just a cloudy, gloomy day, sunny at some points. And then Sunday was just a completely different ball game. I mean, we had northwest winds that were real low. And it was bright and sunny, bluebird skies, and I thought we weren't going to really catch that many fish on Sunday due to the weather conditions. With that front that pushed through, in springtime the fronts really mess with the fish. And Saturday I thought it was going to be a sleigh fest, and then Sunday just felt a little different.
Yeah, and turned out I think Sunday was probably the better of the days. We didn't fish all day. We had a shortened day on Sunday. I think if we had all day, it definitely would have been the better of the 2 days. The thing about this trip that I think was kind of cool was, while a lot of times when you hear about, these smallmouth capitals, you think about Mille Lacs. I mentioned Door County, Sturgeon Bay area. You talk about, some areas of, Lake Ontario and things like that that are just known for giant smallmouth. And you can get into these like tears where you're catching 50 to 100 fish in a day. This was not a numbers game trip, but the fish that we caught were quality. I don't think we had a fish that was smaller than 3.5. That's three and a
No,
half
no,
pounds.
right. Yeah, we caught some really some of the fish that we saw that we were sight fishing, we totally misjudged them. That first fish we caught, when we got it in the boat, we both looked at each other and we're like, yeah, that is definitely bigger, way bigger than 2.5 pounder or whatever. It ended up being almost 5 pounds.
It was, yeah.
So
I remember, like, we were both messing with that fish for a while, and we'll get to more on the story of like how that all came about, and how we discovered that, and how that fish in itself turned our entire day around on Saturday. Because we really were kind of riding the struggle bus for a while there, and just I think the important lesson to be from that is to just keep plugging away. My wife always says to me, when she sends me messages stuff during tournaments, is just keep casting, just keep casting. It's the old Mike Iaconelli, never quit, never give up. You know what I mean?
yep,
And I
exactly.
think we
Yeah, that and
definitely
that's
did that.
Oh, right. That's one thing too. When you tournament fish, every cast can be the game changer for you. You just never know. Something might switch and you catch one, and then next thing you know, as you go on a tear for, however long you have, and you might pull a limit from it. It's one of those, like when we were talking in the boat about fishing the big bass tournaments on Okayest, telling my dad, hey, let's not stop throwing, because you just never know when you're going to catch that next fish. It could be the last 5 minutes of the tournament, and you could plug away a really decent limit right at the end and cash a check. You never know. You got to keep casting.
Yeah. Before we go any farther here, I realize I'm missing one key thing to sitting around the campfire having a chat. I got to get the beverage. So last week we busted open a bottle of Blanton's. This week it is Fortaleza. I know that, John, you're a big tequila fan, so I figured I'd bring out one of my favorite bottles of tequila. If you find this in Mexico,
Nice,
by the way,
very
it goes by
nice.
the label Los Abuelos. In Mexico, it's Los Abuelos. In the States, it's Fortaleza. So,
It's some good juice.
beautiful sound.
I have yet to open up my bottle that I got sitting in the basement. I got the Blanco and I got the Anejo, and I've yet to crack the bottle.
It is. Just an agave bomb. Just see how. I know. So,
Beautiful.
by the way, we're also a YouTube stream, so you can watch this on YouTube. So if you're listening to the podcast version, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to podcasts, of course, we're there. But also make sure to check out the YouTube, because especially this show, I've got some baits, things like that we're going to show. And so if you want to get a look at some of these things, you can check out there. Otherwise, make sure to follow us on socials at Camp Okayest. That's on Instagram, Facebook, and obviously YouTube at Camp Okayest. So we have all of that there for you. And you can get a good look at this beautiful tequila and I'm about to take a sip of. Notice, no ice, no lime, no salt, no, just good tequila. Oh,
Good
doesn't need it.
tequila is a game changer. It's one of those that you're not going to get the nasty hangovers. It's a clean and healthy alcohol. Whereas I'm drinking the banquets. So,
Hey, nothing wrong with the banquets. Nothing wrong with the banquets. That's always a good thing.
mhm.
I was actually earlier today, before we jumped on here, John, I was doing the Founders All Day IPA. I know
Oh,
you're not a big
nice.
IPA fan, but this to me is like the ultimate to me, because it gives me that feel of like a good strong IPA, but it's only like 4.7%. So it's essentially like drinking a Miller latte or something. So that's kind of
I am a I am a
m-
I'm a cheap beer connoisseur. I love my cheap stuff. So, give me the
you and I
Coors,
share that.
Coors Light.
We share the affinity for things like hams. Like hams is my go-to. You go to my fridge right now, there's usually always hams or Miller High Life.
Not bad choices. Not bad choices.
No,
They're tasteful.
no, and they taste so good around a fire. They taste so good at camp. They're just they're more than just okay. Like they are a beer that, and I tell people all the time. So I've talked to some pro brewers, like people that are actually brewers that micro and craft breweries. If you ask them what they drink outside of work, not a beer that like they make, I would guarantee 8 out of 10 of them say hams. No joke. No joke.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
All right. So, and before we jump into a lot of the like nerdy bass stuff, I guess we talk a bit about like kind of like what we did, what the weekend was like, how many red vines I consumed, and the reason that you decided not to jump into the bag with me when I got into them Saturday.
Oh man, yeah, that bag would have lasted a whole whopping 10 minutes this whole week. So after we got back from the trip, went to the store and um, red vines were on sale for like $1.50 or $2 a bag. I
Oh,
quickly snatched up 2 bags of them, one for my office, and then one was supposed to be brought home, and I put in my truck. Get to the office, open up the bag, it was gone in a day. And then this morning I got into work and I was like, "Oh, the red vines is still in the back of my truck." Opened it this morning, it was gone by 5 o'clock this afternoon. So that's all I ate
red
today was just
vines.
red vines. Yeah,
They are
the
superior
good stuff.
licorice. I love that that was the conversation we had at one point in your boat was that red vines are the superior licorice. Like, you could go with Twizzlers. There's, like the old classic Bass Pro Shops, like they're like old-fashioned licorice.
Mhm.
That's a good one to go with. Locally here around the Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin, we're familiar with Fleet Farm. The Fleet Farm, like again, old-fashioned licorice. Another good standby, but there's just nothing quite like red vines. Red vines is the OG. It's where it's at. It is that is one of those weak spots of me. I'm not a huge sugar person. Like I don't do a lot of sweets. Man, you put some red vines in front of me, and it's a staple to me though on any sort of hunting or fishing trip. You know what I mean? Like I feel like there's those certain things you have to have, and I know I posted this on my socials at one point recently about getting off the water, specifically after I fish a tournament. I've always got a Mountain Dew Zero Sugar, and I've got myself a Pearson salted nut roll. I need like those are just like my go-tos. I love them. Like so anytime I get into like if I'm doing like a rutcation week, right? Or I know I'm fishing a tournament for like, a couple days I'm going to be gone or whatever. Like I always make sure I've got red vines with me. I've always got Pearson salted nut rolls. I've got me a couple Dew Zero Sugar, or at least I'm going to stop at some sort of gas station and pick one up. And usually I'll have some sort of bag of chicharrones or the pork skins, pig skins, pork rinds, whatever you want to call them. I'll usually have a bag of those too, because there has been evenings after getting off the water where an entire bag of chicharrones has become my meal.
Oh,
I'm just gonna say
that's an easy
state tournament
that's
last
easy
year.
to do.
Between day one and day two, a whole bag of hot and spicy chicharrones. That was my entire meal after day one. It's amazing I was able to stay in my boat the next day and get any fishing done with how much of that was inside of me. Will not go into details about that.
So speaking of chicharrones, driving up, we stopped and got gas in Sturgeon Bay, and my dad and I were walking around the gas station like a bunch of 10-year-olds, with $50 in our pocket to get snacks because it's a road trip, right? And
Mhm.
we walked past the chips, and I'm like, "Oh, we definitely need these." And here comes a cheap bag of chicharrones right in the truck, and we smashed that bag on the way up. And yeah, I mean, you need that for the car ride, and usually for us, it's we didn't have it this time, but it's usually sunflower seeds. That's a main staple for us when we go out fishing is sunflower seeds, whether that's in the boat or ice fishing or just driving around sunflower seeds all the time. But fortunately, we didn't get them. Maybe that was the deal breaker for us that we didn't catch any 7 pounders. Maybe.
All right. Do you have a flavor of sunflower seeds you go with, John?
No, I'm good with anything. Dill pickles usually really good. Ranch, barbecue, and then just original.
The ranch used to be
Nothing.
like that used to be a jam, like the ranch. And then I remember there was like a hot and was it Buffalo? I think it was either Frank's Red Hot or Buffalo. That was another one. Like I'm going way back when I used to umpire Little League baseball. You have to have the big thing of seeds. Those were like the go-tos all the
Yeah.
time when it came to seeds. What's the one that my wife found me recently? It was it just tahine? I think it was. It was just tahine. You know, the old
They
like
make
mango
tahine
chill
ones?
or the tahine. Yes, there was literally tahine, like sunflower seeds, jammed them last summer. They were so good. I need to find a bag and get them to you. If
Well,
they still make them.
if I find them out, yeah, if I find the bag, I'll buy whatever's on the shelf. Just take the whole shelf.
All right. So it was a lot of fun up in Door County. I mentioned in the first episode, myself and Eric, the Godfather Clark of Okayest, got together. We were chatting about just my background, growing up in Green Bay, fishing up there in and around Sturgeon Bay and all over the Door Peninsula most of my life. So I've got a lot of experience up there fishing. I know you fished a lot of stuff there as well. So, we kind of had two heads that had a lot of experience of things, but the situations were much different. And there was some things that happened that none of us expected from day one, getting out and going to fish a certain area that is known to produce specifically in the pre-spawn time, where they're just kind of roaming before they push up, and there was no fish to be had. I had a couple fish right away follow the A rig, but nothing would commit to it, and we went forever, and we threw everything from A rigs. I spent a lot of time throwing a jerk bait, had nothing on the jerk bait, through everything. I mean, I even went down to I pulled out like an OG of me, a tube, and not just any tube, a chartreuse tube, because to me, smallmouth hate one color, and that's chartreuse. So I pulled out, my old X-Zone chartreuse tube, rigged it, stupid tube style, so I could put it through all the rocks and anything. Not a single anything on it. I was totally shocked that that was nothing. And I don't know if it's just my old school ways have changed. Maybe the chartreuse tube doesn't work like it used to, but I still feel like they hate chartreuse, so they should have hit that. That was not a work for me. Trying to think some other things that I threw that was out there. Did bigger bait underspins, like a X-Zone, like 4-inch swammer with a, was it a 4-aught or a 5-aught, swim bait hook with an underspin on it. Nothing would even follow on that. It wasn't really until we got super finessey. And I think that's something about these fish, and I think specifically the Great Lakes fish, they do like finesse fishing. And I don't mean like finicky, slow, methodical when you think of finesse. I mean just like small finesse baits. It's weird. Normally you think big baits mean big fish. This was like small baits, big fish, and that's what it took for the entire duration of the time we were up there. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest bait that I threw, besides with the sheer size of it, was that 6 and DRT, or excuse me, yeah, DRT TK Tiny Clash. And after that, once I had stopped throwing that, it was more of the 3.2 swim bait style, small dark sleep, 3-inch dark sleeper. Uh, 4-inch shaky shads from Gambler. The smaller stuff really produced, but you can finesse them with the size, but the speed doesn't really change. I mean, the we are just kind of burning baits a little bit. We're trying to get the fish to follow the bait so we can visually see them to know, oh, okay, there's fish here. Let's slow down a little bit, pick this part up, pick this place apart, that kind of stuff. And day one, it didn't really happen all that much until later in the afternoon, right when we were saying, "Oh, we're gonna go home." That's when we
Yep.
stumbled upon them.
Well, and you mentioned that's one thing too about, the way that we fished the entire time, and with your boat specifically, is there was no live scope on the boat. We didn't have live scope, none of that. Like, I know I've got it on my kayak, but like we don't you don't have it on your boat, so that was not even a thing for us. That's where you say, like, we're trying to just find fish and then start picking
Hmm.
it apart. So using the baits was kind of our version of live scope. I think like we definitely went old school with it, of just trying to track them down between just, seeing structure and then seeing if we could get follows and then trying to pick it apart. And the visual aspect of things was the hugest part for us. I mean, I'll basically
Hmm.
flash forward. We fished hard all day. We bounced around different areas between, the Bay side, if you're familiar with the Bay of Green Bay and Lake Michigan, as it is with Door County, the peninsula. If you look at the state of Wisconsin, I'll give you the visual here, the classic way that every Wisconsinite does it. Is like, look at your hand, right? So your thumb is the Door Peninsula. So the inside between, your pointer finger and your thumb, that's the Bay of Green Bay. All the rest of it outside is Lake Michigan. We almost went all the way out to Lake Michigan because Sturgeon Bay itself is a shipping canal, cuts directly through the middle of the thumb. So we went like all over that entire area and really were searching for fish roaming in different stages, and fish that would be coming from the lake, and they'll come in through that shipping canal and they'll spawn and stuff in areas in the canal. And there's all kinds of little cuts and back bays and all that stuff that comes off of it. And then all kinds of bays and cuts and things go off of the main bay and the main lake. So there's all kinds of places for them to be. We covered a lot of ground, and it wasn't till way late in the afternoon when we just decided for shits essentially to like go back in this like really far back bay of a bay. It was like a bay within a bay type situation. It was just such a small, minute area. And I remember as we were rolling through there and just kind of throwing some baits again, trying to just see some stuff. We had already noticed and seen a couple things kind of swimming around real shallow, but couldn't quite figure out for sure what it was because there was some carp mixed in and some other stuff from time to time. And it wasn't until your dad had spotted that one. It's like, oh, it's smallmouth. And you and I both got up in front and looked like, yeah, it was roaming back and forth on shore. But then we're like, wait, that's the bed. Like we saw what looked like a bed, and it legit went and sat up on the bed, which is totally unexpected. It was too soon, you'd think, until we looked at the water temperature. This one random spot that we got to, it was like 60 degrees. And everything else was what, 47, 48 around there. So we just found this one random.
I mean, water temperature was anywhere between 47 to 53. And then that one spot was dang near 60 degrees. And thank the Lord my dad saw that fish, because that did change the whole day after that.
Yeah, and I remember you and I looked at the fish and was like, it's decent. It's not that big. And so I start flipping some stuff at it. And I remember I started flipping, I think it was this chartreuse tube. I started flipping that, and it would just like, it came up and like nudge it with his nose. It wasn't put in its mouth. It was just straight in, like, not even like sometimes fish will suck a bait in and spit it out like very quickly, type thing. It wasn't doing that. It legit just bum rushed it and bumped it with his nose. And so it would hit the bait and the line would jump, but you go to set the hook and there's nothing there. So then I decided, okay, well, I started like continually changing baits. And I remember I went to like bigger and bigger. And the craziest thing was, the thing that pissed the fish off the most was this giant 6-inch cull shad. Like I legit threw on a giant, like soft swim bait and was able to just like flutter it down. And it got like so irritated. Again, it wouldn't take in his mouth. It was still just like banging on it. I think, I had, a Gobius, so dark sleeper, the Z-Man version is the Gobius. I was flipping that in there, and the same thing. I think it took that in its mouth once, and then it took a small swim bait. Like it tried to suck it in, but I just couldn't get the hook set fast enough. Anyway, played with it for the longest time, thought it was smaller. Then you eventually at one point just flip in behind it and basically snag it. It was kind of an accidental hooking situation. And
it's
the fish
one
got
of
taken
those
off.
With bed fishing, it's difficult because you can't be on top of the fish, but when you see your bait disappear, you got to set the hook on it, because you're visually watching the fish, so you set the hook right away, and it's not intentional by any means. You set the hook, and the next thing you know, as it came up, and I'm like, oh. But once again, I felt terrible for it, because I did this to you on Pewaukee as well too. You were trying to catch that one bed fish, and that meme just keeps popping in my head. That look on your face just keeps popping in my head, and I'm like, no, I did it again. Like, oh, this is terrible, but whatever.
It's so funny. This is what you do. Like, you and I will fish together, John. I will work a fish to get it to be so irritated and so frustrated. You will flip it immediately after with something different, and the fish will bite. That's fine. It's teamwork. It's tag team. It's fine. And the meme you say, like, so it was a meme that I made based on a photo that we took last summer when we fished, and I was purposely making kind of a grumpy face, but it's teamwork. It is what it is. The fish was boated. I reached down and, did the old smallmouth scoop, get under its belly. And it wasn't until that moment when I got my hand down around it, that was when we both realized this fish is a lot bigger than we thought. We underestimated the size. We need to readjust our eyesight. How long has it been since either of us have spent time on soft water, as we would call it, in the north, looking at fish? You know what I mean? Like, we didn't really have hard water to be on either this winter, but we haven't been out fishing on water like that and looking at fish, because there is a different magnification. Anyone that does bow fishing understands exactly what I'm talking about, is that fish look different, either different sizes, or again, with bow fishing, you have to aim differently because of the way the water reflects and we struggled with that fish.
Yeah, I mean, that was when you brought it in the boat, we both looked at each other and we're like, "Oh, yeah, that's way bigger." And then every fish after that was like, "All right, this is a really, really nice fish." And just following what we were doing and really watching it really opened up our eyes to, all right, really pay attention to the water temperature, because that was it also carried in the day too. Like, we found warmer water and we found a pile of fish. And I
Yeah.
think that's a very misunderstood thing, is in the springtime, definitely take a look at the water temperatures, because that's going to be a big deciding factor whether you're going to catch numbers or size of fish.
Yeah, northern facing shores or northernmost shores typically tend to warm up the fastest. So that's a lot of times where you would, go to start looking for fish. But even where we were, it was totally random. And, you've got
Mhm.
currents and other stuff like that that play into part on big bodies of water, which, again, if you're not familiar with the Great Lakes, anyone that's ever fished the Great Lakes understands and knows the respect you have to give a body of water like that. It is truly an inland ocean. There are tides, there are currents, there are all of the things that you get at an ocean. These are huge bodies of water that are hundreds of feet deep, and so kind of the same rules and principles can apply at times. And so things kind of can be random based on those tides and currents and, weather. Wind can blow certain, water around different ways. And so different areas will be warmer or colder than others. Sometimes makes absolutely no sense, like that little back bay in a bay, the situation that we found. But so we boated the one that we played with for essentially a half hour. And I remember going, well, let's keep cruising around here and let's keep looking around. And as we got going, it was just fish after fish after fish and big fish and big fish. And like
Mhm.
I lost count of how many we even saw, but I remember we kind of like made like a little lap around this bay within a bay essentially. Looking at kind of flipping around at a couple things, not really like fully committing onto like let's try and catch this fish because some were legit look like they were setting up on a bed. And some were
Mhm.
just still, like, completely roaming, like, just back and forth, and those were the hardest ones. There was so much of that we were, throwing at these fish and flipping, just giving them everything we could, and almost legitimately, they were avoiding our baits. Like, they would see the bait and immediately see it and be heading toward it and know it's there and just veer away. It's like they didn't even
Yep.
wanna get in the vicinity of the bait, and I don't know what or why. Fish are fish. It's, Mother Nature, I guess, so
Well, and then on top of that too, I mean, you got to look at what we did with the water clarity up there as well too. I mean, for somebody that doesn't fish the Great Lakes, at one point we were in what 17 feet of water, and you could almost read a newspaper on the bottom with all this,
yeah.
zebra mussels and everything cleaning up the water. So the water up there is crystal clear. So I think a lot of it comes down to, I rig my rods for fishing down here in Lake Country, Waukesha, southern Wisconsin type deal. So it's usually heavier line. We got clear water up here or in our area, but not super clear like the Great Lakes. So I typically rig my rods with a little bit heavier line. Um, and I think that had a factor. If I would have dropped down a couple pound size lines, I think we would have caught a couple more fish. But we were choosing the ones that we know, we knew that we could actually lock on and catch, with the exception of your weird catch. We're in the smallmouth capital of the world, right? What did you end up catching? That was kind of a shocker for both of us.
Well, that was the funny part is I remember as we were going around that bay and we started seeing this smallmouth roaming around and suddenly you're like, "Wait, that's a largemouth." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, what? There's largemouth in here?" And we start seeing more and more of them, and I'm like the light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, "There's largemouth in here. I bet you I can catch one of these." And some of them were pretty big, which is not a thing you think of. Again, mention the smallmouth capital of the world, as I call it. You're not going there largemouth fishing. No one is thinking about largemouth when you're up north of Green Bay, essentially on the Great Lakes or any Great Lakes alone. You're not really thinking about largemouth. So I decided to reach into my bag of tricks, and luckily, I had one package of worms. Of all the things, I had this one. It's a like a green pumpkin. It's the laminate, so it's green pumpkin and plum, muscleback fat finesse worm. So this is Exo and muscleback fat finesse. So it's a kind of like fat on one side and it's flat on the bottom. So the purple side is like flat. It's got this kind of cool spade ish like tail on it. The cool thing again about these Exxon baits, they're neutrally buoyant, so they float. So I decided to do kind of my Neko rig. So I put, got the all hook, weedless, put the ring on it, and I've shared this on my socials. And I think I talked about it on the show last week. The tip that I shared of like instead of doing nail weights and crap, I keep a bunch of like just general hardware screws, just small screws in my tackle box. Screws right in there, fit the bait. I put that on. I made 3 or 4 flips around into like this one little kind of corner. Just, boom. Next thing you know, rod took off.
Big
3.5 pound largemouth. And a largemouth that looked like it was trying to be a smallmouth because that was a football of a largemouth. It wasn't long, but it was round. That's why it was so big. And that's a giant largemouth for up there. Usually if you're gonna catch largemouth, which they can be caught, especially in areas like Little Sturgeon Bay, or you start getting into Riley's, not really Rowley's, but Riley's sometimes. You go south a little bit. If you go onto the west shore of the Bay of Green Bay, you can get into a little bit more largemouth and some of the kind of, just outside of the creeks and streams and stuff, but it's not very common. And if you do catch them, they're going to be that 2-pound tops. Rarely are you going to find a largemouth that is over 3 pounds. So that was a giant largemouth. Thankfully, again, that I had my one packet of worms this is what I had. And it's not even the color I would have chose. I would have went with a different color, which I had back in my truck. Again, the fact that I jumped in your boat, I kind of did the co-angler thing where I just packed a couple of things of stuff I need into a bag essentially. But I'm so glad that I had this one packet of worms, because this to me made the trip, because part of what was so cool about the trip was having that catching largemouth experience, because again, we're in the smallmouth capital and somehow I'm catching this giant largemouth. And I caught another one right after that, same bait, same thing. Again, it was a little over 2, but it was a chunker. We never put it on the scale, but it was at least 2. I would say it was over 2, maybe 2.5 tops. But we're catching big largemouth up there was something really kind of cool to me.
And then shortly after you caught that one, I mean, my dad and I, we were working that one smallie right there, and
Yeah,
literally like
fully
50 feet
bedded
away, there was
smallie.
another smallie. Yeah,
Yep. Yeah,
that
just
place was
absolutely
just
locked on.
Yeah, I think if we would have when we got out of that little bay, we roped around into another one, and there was some fish in there. I think if we would have went back further, um, like what we did earlier in the day when we found the rock piles and everything, um,
Mhm.
I think if we would have spent more time out there, I bet you we would have found more fish out there as well too. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
one of those what ifs, but the puzzle pieces are all starting to fit together at that point. I bet you we could have caught more fish if we would have stayed back on those rock piles, but we didn't want to do that kind of stuff. I mean, when we ended up finding that bedfish, I looked at you and I said, this is not what we wanted to do. We wanted to catch fish on A-rigs. We wanted to catch fish on swim baits, moving baits, being around, floating around. That's what we wanted to do. And here we are, spot locked on a bed. Like,
I hate bed
great.
fishing.
Not
I
what I
hate
really
doing it.
wanted to do.
Yeah, I absolutely, if I can avoid bed fishing at all costs, I hate doing it. It's just so, I hate to spend an hour on one fish. And then if you don't get that fish, now you've just wasted an entire hour. You know, like I guess I always got that tournament mentality of that. And I get that we weren't fishing in a tournament, so it was a little different, but still the mentality for me, I can't get away from. I hate spending time just staring at a fish on bed, and usually the fish wins. I think that's it. The fish wins, and that frustrates me.
Well, well, yeah. I mean, the fish almost won that day, but that moment when we caught the fish on the beds and moved back in, I mean, that saved our whole day, because at that point we didn't have a fish in the boat. A fish. I mean, I caught a pike, and that was the first fish at what, 11 o'clock in the morning, and
Something
we
like
were
that.
out
Yeah, I
there
think
at like 6:30 in the morning, and then we didn't catch a fish
yeah,
until 11:30. So I mean, and we didn't start really catching them until what, 2ish, 3ish in the afternoon.
something like that. Yeah. And that just goes to show again that same mentality of, whatever you're fishing for, or however you fish, or whatever you do, whether it's fishing, it's hunting, it's, I don't know, basket weaving, whatever your thing is, you just keep plugging away, just keep casting, and you never know what can happen. And that's, I think, part of why I love fishing so much is there's that you never know. Anything can happen in any cast situation. So day one turned around, we caught some decent fish, we had a blast. Um, Fun fact, I did not eat or drink anything the entire day. It hit me as we got off the water drive back. I'm like, I had like a can of sparkling water this morning. I had like half a cup of coffee. I've not drank anything all day, and I've not eaten anything since I had a giant pretzel at Door County Brewing Company Friday night at like 8 o'clock or something. After I spent all day in the water, up there fishing out of the kayak. So yeah, it was good to go get refueled. We had ourselves a nice little northern Wisconsin tavern burger beer situation, which I think is a must on any trip and any sort of when you're not cooking around a campfire situation. Anyhow,
Yeah, I mean that was a lifesaver right there because what halfway through the day I had two jerky sticks, a bag of chips, and a Powerade, and that was it. And usually I don't. I'm the same thing as you. I don't eat when I fish. I try to drink water, but usually I'm so focused I can't eat or drink anything when I fish. And at one point I just said I'm getting the shakes now. I got to start doing this because I'm going to start going crazy. But yeah, when we got off the water, got the boat situated back at the condo, went out for a good burger. It was at that time it was the best tasting burger I've had in a long
isn't
time.
that something?
Uh,
The hungrier you are, it doesn't matter if you're eating a flip flop or you're eating a steak. It is the greatest tasting thing you've had.
yep, yeah, and then finish that off with a brandy old fashioned. I was perfect that night. That was great.
You were doing the true Wisconsin style of things. So then we rolled on into day 2 after getting a couple hours of sleep, and we moved and went to a different part of the door and kind of tried fishing things a little bit differently. Instead of doing that back bay and not again trying to avoid the bed stuff, we were out in the search looking for roaming fish, but fish that we're going to be chewing. And I think Sunday, that day 2 there was the one where it was the key of, I think, really showcasing and showing the micro baits and how smaller baits catch big fish, in and around the Great Lakes. And a lot of guys that fish them regular, I think, would agree with things. I know my MVP bait that caught, what was it 4.5, something like that, whatever the one is that I caught right here, Great Lakes Finesse Sneaky Underspin with an X-Zone. This is like their micro swammer. It's a 2.75-inch little swim bait. That little tiny swim bait on this little tiny, with this little spinner, little jig. This is a 3/8-ounce jig. I mean, this is a small bait. If you're looking at the stream and you see it against my hand, that is a pretty like here. I'll take my iPhone. Like my iPhone versus that bait. That is a very small bait. You wouldn't think, a giant football is interested in this. If you think you take something this tiny or, a big bait like this, I mean, let's be real. If you got a chance between eating, a 2-ounce piece of jerky or a 16-ounce steak, what are you eating? You know what I mean? But this is the ticket. That small bait is absolute ticket. And I know you were fishing with something similar. I think the only thing I would have done differently is I wish I would have had this color with me of the X-Zone swammers. This is that like sexy shad kind of thing. It's like that blue with a little bit of kind of gold flake and almost a little bit of like a gold and yellow hue to the bottom of it. I wish I would have this. I think this might have been a little bit better color than even the white would have been. I know I threw the Stealth Invader a little bit, and I had one come off, a nice one come off with the Stealth Invader, which has got, again, kind of swim bait. It gives kind of the goby feel. And again, it was the Stealth Invader on this same, you know, Great Lakes Finesse jig head. So, like, again, you're showing these are very tiny swim baits that I was fishing with.
Yeah, my swim bait that I was using was a what was it, a 3.8, or it was a 3.2 uh Guggen's swim bait or whatever that they got. It's a Kitech knockoff is what they had.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the bait shop that was near my house only had the Guggen stuff. They didn't have the Kitechs in stock, so I opted for Guggen stuff because they had the right colors I wanted. But usually it's like a 3.2 to 3.8 Kitech is what I usually use, in very similar colors to that. So yeah, that didn't really leave my hand.
I'm trying to, did you have was yours on a jig head or was it just on like a swim bait hook? I'm trying to remember.
Jig head.
Jig head.
It was like it's like 1/4 ounce
Okay.
jig head. It was a 6
All right.
cents jig head. They were on sale. So I picked up a bunch of those. That was like last year that I picked them up. But yeah, very streamlined, very finesse. I mean, just very simple jig head trailer, and you just chuck and wind it real slow. Um, your speed is really determined, by how the fish react to it. So, when we saw fish, we would see them if you were reeling pretty quick. Saw them come up and swipe it, you'd slow it down or you'd speed it up even faster. It really depended on how you saw the fish reacting to the bait. I know that on day 2, there was a couple fish that you had chasing your bait, so you sped it up. They didn't really do anything. So the next fish that followed up, you killed it and went up and slammed it. And I mean, you caught the one fish doing that. I think you
And that
missed
was basically
another
slow
fish.
rolling. It was, yeah, it was like really, and that's kind of one of those tips that I give for fishing these smaller baits and fishing Great Lakes like that sometimes is as slow as you can roll it. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to get hung up in the rocks. So as slow as you can reel it in and not get hung up, you just keep it just coasting just right along the bottom. That's a really great technique, great way to go with. And that's, where you, I guess, kind of got to just get a feel for it. Every reel has a different, gear ratio that goes with it. So it's just kind of really getting a feel for that and knowing what you do. The slower gear ratios obviously can be better for things. I think I was throwing most of my stuff on like a 7-1-1. So again, I was just reeling very slowly. A lot of times my crankbaits, I'll throw like a 5-3-1 or 5-1-1. I tend to use a lot of those slower gear ratios and crankbaits because I want to be able to like get it down and I want to be able to keep it in that range longer, with having that slower gear ratio. That's why I do that in with like crankbaits and stuff. But swim baits, I usually go a little faster. I tend to be a churn and burn type person. So I had to like physically tell myself, slow down, slow your reel. So instead of like normal, like cranking, I had to be like, which was like, it felt like it
Seeing
took
that,
forever to reel a bait back.
well, and that's the opposite of me. Knowing, we fished together in the past, and I know that you are a turn and burn kind of guy, and then here's me going slow. So it was a complete opposite for me of, all right, I got to fish a little bit quicker than what I usually do because I throw a lot of jigs. I am a bottom kind of guy. If it's jigs, if it's not a jig, it's a drop shot type deal for me. That's just my style of fishing, and it's like, all right, I got to move a little bit quicker. We're going to still move the boat slowly and pick apart areas, but I'm still going to fish faster than what I usually fish.
So when we finally found some fish in the area we found it, kind of the best way that we went about things was just face the bow into the wind, put the spot lock on, or if you got an anchor, anchor down, bow into the wind, and just fan cast kind of the area. Again, slow rolling. You don't pick anything up after, 10 minutes. Move the boat a little bit, to the north or to the south or east or, whatever, and just kind of, ride that line. And we kind of found that the most productive spot for us, and I know I put this up, this report was on, I did it because I'm an Omni ambassador. So it's on Omni. If you search out and go to like Bay of Green Bay and smallmouth fishing or whatever, it'll show these baits and all this stuff. But really, it was kind of where like boulders met flat rock. So you get like those big flat sheets of like bedrock essentially, where that connected with big boulders. That was kind of the ticket, I think, of where we found. And always in the area, there was kind of the busted up zebra mussel shells, which are kind of almost created like a pea gravel meets flat rock meets boulders. That whole very why is the word not coming to me? Having that environment and that, oh my gosh, I can't think of this. Like think about like whitetail hunting where you find all these different habitats come together. Those are the most productive areas. Same concept here with the
Oh, the
fish.
pinch points. Yeah, it's pinch points.
Well, I'm just thinking like the habitat itself. You've got boulders, flat rock, small stones, where it's all kind of coming together in an area where it's not just all boulders or it's not like all sand and pea gravel. It's not just all flat rocks. It's having that diversity, biodiversity. Boom, there it is. Would not come to me. The biodiversity of it, I think, is what kept fish there. Let's face it, these fish in the Great Lakes, they're feeding off of round gobies. You know, to play it back, you mentioned earlier, John, the fact that the zebra mussels have really cleaned up the water. I mean, I remember as a kid, like, you don't want to go in the bay. Like, it was gross. It was called Green Bay because the water was green. The paper planes dumped their stuff and it was polluted and it was disgusting. Well, then zebra mussels were introduced. Whether it was intentional or it came through ship ballast, whatever story they want to go with, those really took over. And I remember as a kid when, like, they'd become springtime or like you'd have big waves, they would literally wash up on the shore in just like If you ever seen like snow or ice build up on a shoreline from waves pushing it up, this was zebra mussel shells. It was the like just you'd have mounds of these shells that would be all along the shoreline. And these zebra mussels ate off of all of this phytoplankton and all these other things that are there. They took over, they cleaned the water. Well, then you've got all these zebra mussels, and these are a problem, right? So what was the next thing to come along? Round gobies. The gobies feed off of the zebra mussels. Gobies grow huge, smallmouth, walleyes, everything else are now eating the gobies. And that's what's created this amazing fishery. And I think all of the Great Lakes share that similar thing, which, I mentioned that whether it was here for a reason or not. I still have my theories that I'm not certain that round gobies came in ship ballast. We'll let them tell the story. It feels too good to be true that like all of these things have worked out in the right way. I get that nature always finds a way, as they say in Jurassic Park, but it's just way too coincidental that this thing comes along, cleans the water, but there's a huge problem. And they find somehow this other random fish that's non-native, then cleans up this problem. But also this fish becomes forage for other. It's a perfect scenario, is what I'm saying. Whether it's happy accident or whatever, it's a perfect scenario that we absolutely love in the Great Lakes, and it's what's made these fisheries, whether it's Lake Erie, whether it's Lake Michigan, whether it's Lake Ontario, what they are as far as their smallmouth and walleye fisheries, really.
Yeah, without the zebra mussels, without the gobies, I mean, yeah, we're not going to see the consistent 7 pounders. I mean, you look at Facebook now, and there's guys that are fishing out there all the time, catching 7 pounders. Not every single day, but I mean, they catch 2 or 3 a week, which is for a smallie in Wisconsin, that's almost a common thing now. And in the past, it was never a thing.
Right. It's like I would equate a 7-pound smallmouth is the equivalent of a 10-pound largemouth. And I'm not saying in fight. I'm going to tell you straight out, I'm pretty certain that 7-pound smallmouth will fight harder than that 10-pound largemouth. But in that whole trophy aspect, and like this is a like legit amazing, possibly once in a lifetime catch. A 7-pound smallmouth is the equivalent of a 10-pound plus largemouth. So we don't have giant largemouth necessarily up here in the upper Midwest and really in the northern states. I mean, down south, you think about big bass, you think of Florida, Texas, California. You're going to catch a 10-pounder, you're going there, or Mexico. There's some of those, bass and stuff that they have down in Mexico that grow that way, but you're not going to find that in most places of the country. You go down south, anywhere they do have smallmouth, you're not going to find a 7-pound smallmouth. You're not going to find a 5-pound smallmouth. That like 3.5, like those are like big smallmouth. Up here, we just grow them a lot bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's kind of the trade-off that I feel. That's I guess maybe why I'm such a prideful smallmouth guy is because like I know down south like largemouth that's the bread and butter. So up here, smallmouth's the bread and butter because that's the thing that we can catch that's bigger. That's the one thing that we have that other people don't have that we can hang our hat on. And that's why I love going after those fish, whether I catch 50 of them in a day or I only catch 3 in a day. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. I love catching them anytime. They're one of my favorite fish to target for a multitude of reasons because they will also break your heart. Like, don't ever go into a tournament with a plan that you're just going to catch all smallmouth because they are going to leave. They will not be there. I learned that last year. I knew that, and I knew it was going to happen. But, you and I had fished together pre-fishing for a kayak tournament that I was in. We went out one day in your boat, found a pattern, and I went back throughout the week and kind of kept checking on this school that we found in this pattern. I'd, go out, throw a couple times, I'd catch one, I'd bail out and, go do something else, try and figure something else out, try and find a secondary pattern, find something else, or find that same pattern in a different spot. They were there like all week. So I get day before the tournament. I'm like, my plan is I'm going to go in, I'm going to like throw them no more than 10 casts. I just want to catch one or get one on, shake it off and just bail, do something else. And I did. I got one. I was like, they're here. I got to bail. I'm out of here. And I just instantly ditched it because I'm like, they're going to be here tomorrow. They've been here all week. They've got to be here tomorrow. Just hold out one more day is all I needed. What happened the next day? Gone. I did catch a 6-pound
See you
largemouth
later.
to be a kicker in the bag and help me. Like if it wasn't for a largemouth, that would have been a terrible tournament for me, because I really had to like scratch and claw through some things. And I had some equipment issues that went along with that too. That could be a whole show in itself of explaining that situation. But again, it's just
That's
just keep
tournament
casting, just
fishing,
keep,
though. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, that's tournament fishing. You got to roll with the punches. I think Mike Tyson said it best. You go into a fight with a game plan, right? Until you get punched in the face, and then your game plan's out the door. You just got to roll with the punches and make the best game time decisions that you possibly can. You're gonna learn a lot from just doing that. You can stick to a game plan, but if fish aren't there, all right, you went fishing that day, and that's it is what it is.
Well, if you want to check it out on the YouTube stream, I will have links. I've got links down below to get you directly to these specific baits that we've talked about, so you can pick these up for yourself. So if you want to click those links and go purchase them, go grab the baits, go fish some smallmouth. And these techniques, I think, while we talk a lot about it being specific to the Great Lakes, they really are stuff that could work anywhere on smallmouth, especially you get into some of the southern river system type things. I really think, especially like this sneaky underspin, this small swim bait situation, really, I think could play well. And I even think some finicky largemouth. You want to start thinking about these techniques, that slow rolling, small swim baits, underspin, or just jig head without the underspin. The big trend right now, everything is with live scope and the whole strolling, mid strolling, pinging a minnow, whatever phrase they want to use for it this week, of looking at fish on your live scope, casting on top and basically, and kind of like almost vertical jigging, like on a horizontal plane, watching them, and somewhat similar. But I think this is, you don't have live scope or you just want to go out, cast, and have some fun, a really cool way to catch a lot of fish, So small swim baits, small jig heads. Like I said, a couple of that I've shown, X-Zone stuff. I mean, I get that it's one of my sponsors, so I use a lot of their product. There's a lot of other stuff out there too that you could check out. And you mentioned Kitech. A lot of people use Kitech. Trying to think some of the other ones that would be really versatile. I know Great Lakes Finesse, they actually make their own little kind of like, they're not even swim baits. They're more similar. And they're what's Z-Mans that they do? They have one that they're a Laztech that it doesn't have a swim bait tail, just like a pointed tail. But something like that would work on a small jig head as well, kind of just slow jerking or slow rolling to catch fish. So
And when you
that's just a
fish
couple
a
of tips
little,
that I definitely wanted to make sure to share.
yeah, and when you fish little baits like that, you don't need a ton of action with it because you're going to impart a lot of it. I mean, think about when we were hitting the waves, even that wave movement. When we're fishing a steady retrieve, that wave movement is going to input a lot of action in your bait. So I think they do that on purpose, knowing the style of how these guys fish up here.
Yeah, that would absolutely make sense. Number one tip, if you're going to give anyone fishing smallmouth, if you can think of something like just the bare bottom of the barrel tip you'd give someone, John, what would you say?
Don't get frustrated with them because they're going to annoy the living hell out of you. Just don't get frustrated with them. Roll with the punches. Be observant when you're fishing certain areas, and just look for the small details. I mean, that day two, the small details of where the boulders met the sheetrock, met the shell beds. That right there is details. So you got to be detailed oriented to be successful in smallie fishing.
You could probably go for any fishing the same way.
Yeah. Another one would be, just stay positive. They're gonna annoy you. On tournament fishing, you got a good pattern going. They're gonna leave you the next day. You got to know that they're gonna constantly be moving. Same thing. Just keep moving with them. You're gonna stumble upon them. You're gonna find them again, and you're gonna catch them. That the pattern's not gonna change, but where you might catch them will change at some point.
Absolutely. All right. Since it is Camp Okayest and we're all just okay at things and just trying to survive through and, be okay, give me one of your most okay moments recently.
Well, I put the plug in the boat this time.
You can think deep.
So that's a
You
good
can
one.
think shallow. There's a good start. Yeah, pretty okay moment is not putting a plug in a boat. I think I reminded you
Taking the
day
rear
one is like put the plug in the boat because that's what I do every time.
Yeah, it's that, and then when you're getting ready to launch the boat, taking the back straps off the boat because that's kind of hard to get your boat off the trailer when there's only one strap on there and you're spinning around in circles.
Have you done that?
In my
Sounds like
grandpa's,
experience.
yeah, in my grandpa's boat, I've done both actually in the same trip where we forgot to take one strap off and we forgot the plug. That was sat there and we looked at each other and all you could do is just laugh after you're draining the boat out and you're like, all right, let's do this the right way. Let's take the strap off. Let's put the plug in there, call it a day, and let's go catch some fish.
All right. Well, what's the next trip you got planned? You got something in the works? Some other you plan on fishing something anytime soon, or what's Jon Reznack up to?
Well, I'm gonna be whenever I get a free weekend going out fishing locally. My dad and I we have that tournament in August on Okayest, so I think we're just gonna sit down on Okayest and really get to fish that lake and learn it. I've always done well out there, but I've never really put some time into it. So I think this year we're going to spend a lot of time out there getting to really know the lay of the land and really pattern the fish from pre to post spawn to summer to August patterns. Really getting to know those fish and where they move and trying to predict them. So I think we're going to spend a lot of time out there. Um, Hopefully get out to the Madison chain, fish out there for a little bit, and hopefully one more trip out to Door County in late August, early September, and try to catch them on the A rig right before they go into the fall feeding frenzy.
All right. Well, now that tournament you talk about that you do with your dad every year, that's a charity event, right?
Yeah, so it's set up for it's called the Big Bass Battle on Okayest. It's a big fish tournament, which is it's something typically I don't fish, right? Because I'm usually catch 5 fish, biggest fish you can possibly do. This one's a lot easier because you got to just catch the biggest fish. So you can go out there and catch numbers, and that's what my dad and I usually try to do is just catch numbers, knowing that the big ones may be there. But it's a cool and different way to fish a tournament because every 2 hours they have a weigh-in. And just catch a nice 3-pounder, throw it in the live well, and see what you got at weigh-in. Okay, you didn't win that round. That's fine. You got 4 other rounds that you can go out and win. So it's a cool concept. It's totally different than something that I've done, for the last 15 years that I've been tournament fishing. It's something cool. It's something to get my dad into, who doesn't fish a ton of tournaments, so he doesn't have the mentality that I do. But it's a good event. A lot of the proceeds sponsor organizations for veterans, and talking this weekend with my dad, he's a vet, so giving back to the vets, and it's got a special place in my heart, and I know it does for him. He's all excited because we got jerseys made this year. So he was a Marine, so he's got the Marine Corps emblem on his jerseys. It's a cool organization, and if somebody's in the area and wants to check it out, it's on Okayest Lake in Waukesha. It's called the Big Bass Battle on Okayest.
All right, love it. Well, good luck with that tournament. Good luck with everything else you got going throughout the summer. I'm sure you and I will obviously be talking more and more throughout the summer, especially as I get rolling into my tournament season. I know my first tournament got canceled due to weather, which is kind of crazy. You think but in kayaks, you legitimately have to take weather into account. You can't be out in over 30-mile-an-hour gusts and put a bunch of guys in 12-foot pieces of plastic out there. It's just a safety situation. So next weekend. All right. So this show is dropping on the 9th of Friday, May 9th. Yeah, secret time. We recorded this like a day or two ahead of time. All right. Eventually this will be like a legit live drop situation. But so it's recorded a day or two ahead of time. Then it'll be a week from tomorrow, essentially, then my first tournament. So I will be out doing some pre-fishing this weekend. And hope to get a little of that practice in before it's time to go. And now with that reschedule from the first tournament, it puts a wrinkle in my entire month of June. So I've basically between now and the end of June have 2 weekends off. So that family life situation and doing things around the house, I have 2 weekends off between now and end of June.
Yeah, get your honey to-do list done now.
That's all I'm going to say. Yeah, that's about it. I'm lucky that in our house we're very 50-50, and I kind of get some stuff done during the week, and so it's not as daunting if you have to do stuff. Except for mow the lawn, I still have to do that. This is crazy. Like I mowed my lawn before I left to go up to the door, for this trip that you and I did. I came home on Sunday and it looked like I didn't do anything. I don't know what happened or who fertilized my entire yard, but you swear I didn't do anything. I cut it down to like the grass was maybe an inch long at best, and it's like 4 inches tall now. Maybe not full, but you're saying like it's grows so crazy fast. And I was trying to do the whole no mow May thing, because that helps out
Right.
the bees and helps out, which realistically, unless you have a bunch of dandelions and stuff like that, it really isn't a huge benefit. I actually do. My backyard actually does get a bunch of dandelions and stuff, and I usually let them first come up, and then after they first kind of do the thing, then I start picking and plucking them. But I want to give the bees and all that kind of their fair shake at things. And we have a garden and stuff, so you want to keep the bees around to do their thing and help out the gardens and whatnot. So yeah, I don't know about this year if I'll be able to do it if the yard keeps growing the way it's growing. It's like every chance I get, mow it, because I ain't gonna be able to do it the next 3 weekends because I'm gonna be fishing
That's what
somewhere.
AstroTurf is for, so you don't have to mow the grass anymore. Chop it all down, lay some AstroTurf, and call it a day.
Well, remember, we got a pool in the backyard, so we've got last year I know we had a 10-foot round pool above ground. This year we're looking at upgrading and moving to a 16 by 10, which will essentially take up like half the backyard. So that's kind of my theory of where I'm going with it, is if I just eliminate half the yard, then it's not as much mowing to do. So,
Yeah, one or
let's just
two
go with that.
passes, call it a day.
Let's straight eliminate. That's right. Good enough for me. Good enough for the neighbor. All right, John, we're gonna let you go. Let you get into the evening. I'm gonna finish sipping the tequila. We're gonna enjoy a little more time around the bonfire here, and we'll catch you back here next week. I believe we are gonna chat with Shaun of X2 Power. So we'll get some answers on some lithium batteries. So if you've got questions about lithium battery technology, what it is, how it can benefit you, and I don't mean just in fishing applications. This is crazy. They've actually got this really awesome new product that came out from X2 that can be an amazing power source for you wherever you are, specifically if you lose power. Right? It's like kind of like a regenerator replacement thing. Really cool stuff. So we're gonna get a lot of that stuff, and the whole lithium technology with camping and hunting and all of it with Shaun Budiak. And I know we got a show coming up here with one of the hosts of Turkey Season, one of the shows here on the Okayest podcast network, and their host just accomplished an amazing feat in turkey hunting. So we're gonna have him on in a couple of weeks. So just a little preview, some shows we got coming up. But if you want to check out conversation we had with Greg Tubbs last week, Mr. Tubbs, the most interesting man in the world. We talk a lot about food and his turkey season, which, by the way, update on Greg's turkey season. He told the story on this show how he went out earlier in the morning and had two totally okayest moments, really badly missed a bird. Literally the next day, he then went out and shot a giant tom. It was like as big as as long as a shotgun. It was the longest turkey I've ever seen. So congrats, Tubbs. Tubbs got his bird. If you listen to the Okayest Hunter, I'm guarantee they talked about Tubbs' bird. So congrats to him. Whatever you got going on in the outdoors, whether it's hunting, fishing, camping, hiking, just spending time with family on your back patio, enjoy it. That's what it's all about. Come to camp. We'll see you here next week.